Just moments ago, the silence surrounding the royal family shattered. A statement cold, calculated, and devastating emerged from Kensington Palace, confirming what insiders had long feared but never dared to say aloud. At the center of it all, a child who was once destined for royal legacy. What has happened to Archie is not just shocking, it may rewrite everything we thought we knew about the monarchy. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The announcement did not arrive with the usual ceremonial build-up or carefully timed press briefing. It was released without warning, bypassing long-standing royal communication rituals that typically cushion difficult news with polished choreography. There were no senior aides offering gentle context, no coordinated appearances to soften the blow, only a stark message delivered into a waiting world. And within minutes, that message ignited a firestorm. What stunned observers most was not merely the content, but the tone. Palace statements are traditionally wrapped in diplomacy, layered with gratitude and continuity. This one felt different. The language was described by royal correspondents as unusually final, stripped of ambiguity, devoid of reassurance. Words that should have soothed instead sounded like a door, closing quietly, permanently. Phrases that appeared procedural on the surface carried an undercurrent of irreversible consequence. For those fluent in the monarchy's subtle codes, this was not routine. It felt like a line drawn in stone. And when an institution built on centuries of continuity begins to sound definitive, even cold, seasoned analysts know something profound has shifted. The global media reacted with dizzying speed. Headlines splintered across continents, each attempting to decode the phrase "tragic update" that pulsed at the heart of the statement. Was it symbolic? Was it legal? Was it deeply personal? Speculation spiraled as commentators clashed over interpretation. Some suggested a restructuring of titles or roles. Others warned that the wording hinted at a deeper rupture, one not easily repaired. Social platforms flooded with grief, confusion, and outrage. The palace had offered few details, and in that vacuum, theories multiplied. The world was left grasping at fragments, trying to piece together meaning from a message that seemed designed to reveal and conceal at the same time. Then came another detail, subtle but impossible to ignore. In the initial release, there was no direct mention of Meghan Markle or Prince Harry. For a child so publicly tied to their narrative, their absence felt deliberate. Royal experts quickly pointed out that omission can speak louder than presence. Historically, when the monarchy wishes to create distance, it relies not on confrontation but on silence. Names fade from official lines. References grow impersonal. The institution tightens its language, shifting focus away from individuals and back toward itself. It is a strategy refined over generations, a way to reshape the story without appearing to wage war. And in this case, that strategy appeared unmistakable. Yet beneath the institutional maneuvering lies something far more human. At the center of this storm stands a child caught between identity and expectation, between a birthright and a battleground. Archie was once heralded as a symbol of modernization, a bridge between tradition and a rapidly changing world. Now, he seems to sit at the crossroads of power and protection, legacy and autonomy. The monarchy speaks of duty and structure. His parents have spoken of freedom and safety. Somewhere in that clash, a young life has become entwined with forces far larger than itself. And as the world tries to decipher coded language and palace protocol, one truth echoes louder than the rest. This is not merely about titles or tradition. It is about belonging, about inheritance, about who controls the narrative of a future king or a child who may never be allowed to claim that role. But to understand why this announcement carries such weight, we must go back to the moment Archie's very existence first disrupted the royal narrative. When Archie was born, the world celebrated, but behind palace doors, something far more complicated was unfolding. This wasn't just another royal birth. It was a moment that quietly challenged centuries of tradition, expectation, and control. What seemed like joy on the surface may have been the beginning of a fracture the monarchy was never prepared to handle. To the public, he represented renewal, a fresh chapter in a centuries-old institution, eager to prove it could evolve. Yet within the walls of power, his arrival stirred unease. Because Archie was not only a child, he was a symbol. And symbols can unsettle even the strongest dynasties. From the beginning, his birth altered the narrative of lineage. For generations, royal succession followed a familiar script, predictable and carefully preserved. But Archie's existence introduced complexity into that script. He embodied a blending of histories, cultures, and expectations that did not fit neatly into the monarchy's rigid framework. Some saw progress, others saw unpredictability. And in an institution built on stability, unpredictability is often perceived as risk. Conversations began quietly, not about celebration, but about placement. Where would he stand? How visible should he be? What role would he eventually play in a structure that depends so heavily on hierarchy and control? Behind closed doors, discussions intensified over titles and protocol. The question of wet. The question of wet. Her Archie would receive a traditional royal title became more than administrative. It became philosophical. Officially, the decision to withhold such a title was framed as modernization, a step toward a streamlined monarchy free from outdated formalities. It was presented as progressive, even protective. But insiders hinted that the reasoning ran deeper. Titles confer not just status, but power, security, and permanence. Denying one can signal distance. It can redraw lines without announcing them. And for those watching closely, the move felt less like innovation and more like recalibration. At the same time, subtle tensions were already taking shape between the Sussex household and senior royals. Differences in approach, in communication, in worldview began to surface in ways small but telling. Public appearances remained cordial, polished, reassuring, yet beneath the surface, priorities clashed. The Sussexes sought autonomy, narrative control, a new rhythm. The institution leaned toward tradition, containment, and adherence to unspoken rules. These were not dramatic confrontations. They were quieter frictions, missed signals, adjusted plans, guarded statements. But in a family where symbolism matters as much as substance, even small shifts carry weight. The media told one story, of unity, of a monarchy, refreshed by youth and diversity. Headlines celebrated a new era. Photographs suggested harmony. Yet those within palace circles described a far more complicated reality. There were concerns about exposure, about precedent, about how much space this new branch of the family should occupy in the royal constellation. The public saw warmth. Internally, calculations were underway. It was a delicate balancing act, embrace change without surrendering control. And somewhere in that balancing act, the question lingered, unspoken but persistent. Was Archie ever meant to fully be, long within the structure he had been born into? As he grew, so did the weight of that uncertainty. Identity within the monarchy is not simply inherited. It is assigned, shaped, and sometimes restricted. For a child positioned at the crossroads of legacy and reform, belonging was never guaranteed. The very qualities that made him historic also made him complicated, and complications, in royal history, rarely resolve themselves without consequence. What began as celebration slowly evolved into quiet divergence, the kind that spreads gradually before it becomes impossible to ignore. And as whispers grew louder, the first signs of a deeper divide began to surface, one that would soon force impossible choices. What happens inside palace walls rarely stays hidden forever. Over time, subtle cracks became impossible to ignore. Meetings that ended in silence, invitations that never arrived, and decisions quietly made that would shape Archie's future without his voice ever being heard. This wasn't just family tension. It was a silent war over legacy, identity, and control. The fracture that began as a whisper after his birth was now evolving into something heavier, something charged with consequence. Behind formal smiles and carefully crafted statements, disagreements were no longer theoretical. They were personal. Reports began to surface of internal disputes over how Archie should be raised and what role he would one day occupy. At the heart of it was a fundamental question. Would he grow up as a royal bound by centuries of expectation, or as a child granted the freedom to define himself beyond palace walls? For some within the institution, the answer seemed obvious. Tradition had always dictated the path. Structure ensured survival. Public duty was not optional. It was inherited. But for his parents, the vision appeared different. They spoke of protection, privacy, and choice. Two philosophies, both fiercely defended, now stood in direct opposition. And Archie, too young to understand, had already become the center of a debate that would determine the shape of his life. The pressure to conform reportedly intensified. There were expectations about appearances, about timing, about presentation, suggestions about how often he should be seen, how he should be introduced, what symbols he should represent. None of it was random. In a monarchy, every gesture reinforces continuity. Every child embodies narrative. Yet the Sussex household seemed increasingly resistant to allowing Archie to be molded entirely by institutional design. That resistance, subtle at first, was perceived by some senior figures as defiance. And in a system where loyalty is measured by adherence, defiance carries consequences. The emotional toll of these tensions began to ripple outward. Strain between Prince Harry and senior royals grew more visible in tone, if not in detail. Communication reportedly faltered. Conversations once grounded in shared history now felt weighted with disagreement. For Harry, this was not simply about protocol, it was about his son. Protecting Archie meant challenging a structure that had shaped his own childhood in ways both privileged and painful. For the monarchy, preserving order meant reinforcing boundaries that could not easily bend. Love and loyalty were no longer aligned. They were competing forces pulling in opposite directions. As months passed, the Sussex family appeared increasingly isolated within the royal framework. Engagements were fewer. Public messaging felt carefully separated. The sense of belonging that had once been celebrated now seemed conditional. Observers noted a shift in language, in positioning, in subtle hierarchy. Archie's place within the line of succession remained technically secure, yet the emotional narrative arrow on him felt uncertain. Would he be embraced as a future pillar of the monarchy, or gradually edged toward the margins? The first indications that his status might not follow the expected path were no longer abstract, they were unfolding in real time. What began as internal disagreement was slowly transforming into something irreversible. The divide was not explosive, it was methodical. Each decision layered upon the last, each compromise avoided, each silence heavier than the one before. And through it all, a child's future hung in the balance, tethered to choices made by adults, navigating pride, power, and protection. The silent war over legacy had reached a point where neutrality was no longer possible. Something had to give. Then came a moment that would change everything, a decision so bold it sent shockwaves across the globe. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped away from royal duties, it wasn't just a departure, it was a declaration. But what few realized at the time was how deeply this decision would affect Archie. Behind the headlines of freedom and independence, a quiet consequence was taking shape, one that would follow him for years. The world saw boldness, even rebellion. Yet beneath that defiant narrative lay something far more complicated. A choice that liberated his parents while quietly redefining his destiny. The so-called exit was framed as a bid for autonomy, a refusal to remain confined within traditions that felt suffocating. For Harry and Meghan, it was about control over their story, over their safety, over their son's upbringing. But liberation rarely comes without cost. In stepping back from official duties, they also stepped away from the protective shield of the institution. What had once been guaranteed security, funding, ceremonial inclusion suddenly became negotiable. The monarchy responded swiftly, methodically, with statements that balanced regret and resolve. There would be no half-in, half-out arrangement. Roles would be clarified, boundaries reinforced. The message was unmistakable. Independence required separation. That separation carried tangible consequences. Certain privileges tied to royal status were removed, not dramatically, but decisively. Public funding ceased, official representation shifted, military appointments and patronages were reassigned. On paper, these were administrative adjustments. In reality, they marked a profound shift in identity. For Archie, still too young to grasp the implications, the ground beneath his inherited legacy was quietly rearranging itself. The safety net of palace protocol was no longer automatic. His connection to the monarchy was no longer embedded in daily function, but defined by distance. Questions about his future role began to surface almost immediately. Would he return one day as a working royal? Would he grow up entirely outside the ceremonial framework that shaped generations before him? Relocation to another continent amplified those uncertainties. Geography became symbolic. An ocean now lay between him and the institution that had once mapped his future. For some observers, this was the ultimate act of freedom. A child spared the pressures of palace life. For others, it was a forfeiture of heritage, a narrowing of options that could never fully be restored. For Harry, the emotional stakes were even sharper. He was not merely a prince stepping away. He was a father choosing a different path for his son. That choice demanded courage, but it also demanded sacrifice. Walking away from royal duty meant confronting the weight of legacy, the expectations of family, the judgment of history. It meant knowing that every step taken toward independence would be interpreted as defiance. Protecting Archie required challenging the very structure that had defined his own identity, and in doing so, Harry accepted that his son's relationship with the monarchy would never be simple again. Thus began Archie's life outside traditional royal systems. No longer framed primarily as a future royal figure, he became something else, a symbol of transition, of rupture, of possibility. His childhood would not unfold within the predictable rhythm of palace engagements and public milestones. It would be shaped instead by a narrative of departure, by the tension between inheritance and autonomy. The rebellion that electrified headlines was only the surface. Beneath it, a quieter story was unfolding, one of recalibrated titles, recalculated allegiances, and a young boy growing up in the shadow of a decision that reshaped his place in history. But stepping away didn't mean escaping the monarchy's reach, and what came next would prove just how far that influence extended. There's a line in royal life that few ever cross, and once you do, there's no returning. For Archie, that line wasn't drawn by his own actions, but by decisions made around him. Slowly, almost invisibly, his royal identity began to shift. Not removed overnight, but altered, piece by piece, until something essential was at risk of disappearing entirely. It did not happen with a single decree or dramatic announcement. It happened in subtleties, in wording, in absence, in silence. At first, the distancing was almost imperceptible. Official communications grew less frequent in their references. Milestones that might once have been acknowledged with public warmth passed with restrained formality or no mention at all. The monarchy did not declare separation. It allowed it to unfold quietly. In royal history, omission can be more powerful than confrontation. And as Archie's connection to official recognition became less visible, observers began to ask whether this was a temporary adjustment or a deliberate recalibration of status. Behind that recalibration lay a deeper debate, one that cut to the core of monarchy itself. Was royal identity and entitlement secured by birthright, or was it dependent on institutional approval and active service? Technically, lineage remained unchanged. Bloodlines cannot be edited, yet the monarchy has always been as much about function as heritage. Titles, styles, and roles are reinforced through participation. And participation, in Archie's case, had grown increasingly distant. Supporters argued that his place was guaranteed, that history would eventually correct the present ambiguity. Critics countered that proximity defines relevance, and proximity had clearly shifted. His absence from key royal events intensified the uncertainty. Major ceremonies unfolded without him. Historic gatherings marked continuity, yet his name was rarely spoken in those contexts. It was not hostility. It was something colder: detachment. Each event he did not attend subtly reshaped public perception. The image of a young prince growing up within palace tradition was gradually replaced with something else entirely. And in that replacement, identity began to blur. The media narrative followed suit. Headlines that once described him as a royal child began to recast him through a different lens: less heir, more celebrity offspring. Coverage shifted from institutional legacy to lifestyle speculation. The monarchy thrives on symbolism, rooted in duty. Celebrity culture thrives on personality and exposure. Archie was now caught between those frameworks, claimed fully by neither. The transformation was not explosive, it was incremental. But incremental change, sustained over time, can alter destiny just as profoundly as any dramatic rupture. Beneath the headlines, the psychological implications loomed quietly. Identity, especially in royal life, is not simply about title. It is about belonging. Growing up in the shadow of ambiguity raises questions no child should have to confront. Who am I within this history? Where do I stand in a lineage that once defined my future? The monarchy's silence only deepened those questions. Palace officials offered no clarifications, no sweeping affirmations. To some, that silence felt strategic, a calculated refusal to inflame tensions. To others, it appeared intentional, a method of allowing distance to solidify without open conflict. And so the uncertainty lingered, heavy and unresolved. Not a dramatic exile, not a formal removal, but a slow evolution that left something fragile hanging in the balance. A royal identity, once celebrated as groundbreaking, now hovered in a space between recognition and retreat. The longer the silence stretched, the more it seemed to speak. And then, just when the uncertainty seemed unbearable, the palace finally spoke. The words were brief, but their impact was devastating. In a carefully crafted statement, Kensington Palace confirmed what many feared but no one could fully grasp. This wasn't just a clarification, it was a turning point, a moment where speculation became reality, and Archie's place within the monarchy was redefined in a way no one saw coming. The announcement did not raise its voice. It did not need to. Every sentence carried precision, every phrase chosen with the discipline of an institution that understands the power of language better than anyone. Observers immediately began dissecting the wording. There were no dramatic accusations, no overt declarations of exclusion. Instead, there were phrases like revised framework, evolving roles, and long-term alignment with institutional priorities. To the casual reader, it sounded administrative. To those fluent in royal communication traditions, it sounded seismic. The monarchy has ways relied on nuance to signal transformation. When it wishes to preserve dignity while enforcing change, it turns to coded restraint. And within that restraint, the phrase tragic update stood out heavy, almost ominous. In royal vocabulary, tragedy rarely refers to spectacle. It often signals something irreversible. The interpretation of that phrase ignited immediate debate. Was it personal tragedy? Institutional? Symbolic? In the monarchy's history, such language has been used to soften announcements that reshape succession, redefine standing, or quietly distance individuals from central power. It does not scream exile. It whispers inevitability. And this time, the whisper suggested that Archie's royal status, once assumed secure by birth, had been formally altered, not erased entirely, but diminished, reframed, shifted from expectation to exception. Confirmation came not through dramatic proclamation, but through careful omission and subtle restructuring. References to future royal duties were absent. Language surrounding succession emphasized active working members and core representation. The implication was unmistakable. Archie would not occupy the role once imagined for him within the operational heart of the monarchy. Birthright remained a matter of record, but institutional endorsement, the lifeblood of royal relevance, had been recalibrated. It was a quiet demotion wrapped in diplomatic phrasing. The public reaction was immediate and fierce. Shock rippled across media outlets. Commentators struggled to interpret whether this marked fairness or fallout. Some defended the monarchy's right to protect its structure. Others accused it of punishing a child for decisions made by his parents. Confusion blended with outrage. Supporters of Harry and Meghan saw confirmation of long-suspected distancing strategies. Traditionalists argued that roles must align with duty and proximity. In the clash of perspectives, one truth stood starkly exposed. The monarchy had chosen clarity over ambiguity, and that clarity came at a cost. For Harry and Meghan, the emotional implications were profound. This was no longer abstract tension or subtle sidelining. It was official. As parents, they now faced the reality that their son's relationship with his ancestral institution had been formally reshaped. The protective instinct that fueled their departure now collided with the permanence of institutional decree. In choosing independence, they had accepted consequences. But seeing those consequences etched into official language carried a different weight. It was one thing to step away. It was another to witness the structure step back in return. Symbolically, the announcement reached beyond one family. It spoke to the monarchy's future, its priorities, its willingness to narrow its circle, its insistence on discipline over sentiment. By redefining Archie's standing, the institution signaled a commitment to consolidation, to a leaner identity centered on active duty rather than expansive lineage. It was a declaration that tradition, even when evolving, remains guarded. And in guarding itself, the monarchy revealed both its strength and its rigidity. Yet beneath the headlines and institutional analysis lies something more fragile, more human. Because while the palace speaks in measured tones and the media debates implications, a child grows up within the shadow of those words. Titles may shift, roles may be revised, but identity, once unsettled, echoes far beyond any official statement. But beyond the headlines and analysis lies something far more profound: the human cost of this decision. Strip away the titles, the protocol, the centuries of tradition, and what remains is a family, a child, parents, and a decision that may echo for generations. Behind every royal headline is a deeply personal story, and in this case, it's one of heartbreak, identity, and a question no one can easily answer. Where does Archie truly belong? The palace may speak in statements and strategies, but within the walls of any home, even one shaped by royalty, the consequences are felt in silence, in private conversations, in the spaces where duty collides with love. For Harry, the strain is layered and relentless. He is not only a prince navigating institutional expectation, he is a son standing at odds with the very structure that raised him. Every adjustment to Archie's status is more than political, it is personal. It reopens memories of his own childhood, of walking behind tradition, even when it felt heavy. As a father, he now faces the unbearable tension between legacy and protection. To shield his son from pressures he once endured, he had to challenge the family he still loves. That paradox does not resolve easily. It lingers, pressing against him with every headline, every formal declaration, every carefully worded distance. Meghan's perspective carries its own quiet weight. For her, the instinct to protect Archie has always stood above ceremony, yet protection can feel like both victory and loss at once. Safeguarding him from institutional scrutiny may preserve his childhood, but it also alters his connection to a history that cannot simply be erased. There is empowerment in stepping away, in choosing autonomy, but there is also grief in watching closed doors that once seemed open by birthright. The strength required to stand firm against centuries of tradition comes with isolation, and isolation has a cost. And at the center of it all is Archie, a child whose identity is being shaped by forces beyond his understanding. He did not choose lineage or departure. He did not choose titles or their revision. Yet his name has become a symbol in a debate far older than he is. Identity in the monarchy is not merely inherited. It is negotiated, and for him, that negotiation began before he could speak. The question of belonging, of whether he is inside or outside, royal or removed, hovers quietly over his future. It is a question that may follow him long after the headlines fade. Public empathy has poured in, softening the sharp edges of institutional rigidity. Many see not politics, but a family navigating impossible terrain. Yet institutions are not built on empathy alone. They are built on continuity, on preserving structure even when individuals feel the strain. This is where the generational conflict within the monarchy becomes most visible. Older traditions insist on stability through conformity. A younger perspective demands evolution through choice. Between those forces stands a child who embodies both past and future, yet fully belongs to neither. The long-term emotional consequences remain uncertain, but they are undeniable. Relationships shift. Trust is tested. Narratives harden. What began as a disagreement over roles has uncant, folded into a profound redefinition of identity and allegiance. The monarchy preserves its framework. The family protects its own. And somewhere in that divide, bonds are stretched in ways that history will remember quietly, even if it never fully records the private cost. And yet, even in the midst of loss, a new narrative may be quietly forming. When a chapter ends this dramatically, the question isn't just what was lost, but what comes next. Archie's story is far from over. In fact, it may only be beginning. Free from the constraints of tradition, yet marked by its absence, his future stands as one of the most unpredictable and potentially transformative stories the royal world has ever seen. The uncertainty that once felt like rupture may, in time, become reinvention. And reinvention has always carried a quiet kind of power. Outside the rigid architecture of palace life, Archie now occupies a rare space. He is connected to history, yet not confined by its daily demands. That separation, once framed as loss, may also offer possibility. Without the weight of ceremonial obligation pressing against every milestone, he has the freedom to shape an identity not dictated by balcony appearances or institutional expectation. For the first time, a child born into such proximity to the throne may grow up defining success on his own terms. That possibility is radical not because it rejects legacy, but because it reinterprets it. Public fascination with his future has not diminished. It has intensified. The world continues to watch, not out of idle curiosity, but because his path challenges a centuries-old formula. Will he embrace his heritage later in life, stepping toward the institution with a perspective shaped by distance? Or will he carve out a completely independent role, proving that royal blood does not require royal duty? Every appearance, every statement, every silence fuels speculation. In a way, absence has made him more compelling. The less defined his role becomes, the more symbolic it feels. There remains the fragile possibility of reconciliation. History has shown that monarchies can adapt when survival demands it. Time softens tensions. Generations shift. What feels permanent today may evolve tomorrow. The door, though narrowed, is not necessarily sealed. If mutual understanding grows, if institutional rigidity meets personal resolve halfway, a new balance could emerge. Yet the opposite outcome is equally plausible. Distance can harden into permanence. Separation can solidify into a new normal. The uncertainty itself has become part of the narrative. Culturally, Archie's position is unprecedented. He represents a bridge between tradition and modernity, between inherited power and chosen autonomy. His life forces a broader question. What does royal legacy truly mean in a changing world? Is it measured solely by duty within palace walls? Or can it extend beyond them into influence, advocacy, and global identity? In stepping outside the traditional framework, his family may have unintentionally expanded the definition of what it means to belong to a monarchy. Legacy, once defined by proximity to the throne, may now include the courage to redefine one's place within it. As years unfold, the world will continue to interpret his journey as a reflection of the institution itself. If he thrives independently, it may signal that monarchy must evolve or risk irrelevance. If reconciliation occurs, it may demonstrate resilience within tradition. Either way, his story will not fade quietly. It will ripple outward, shaping conversations about identity, power, and the future of inherited institutions. And so we watch not for scandal, but for transformation. Because in the end, this isn't just about one child. It's about the future of the monarchy itself. This moment may be remembered as more than just a family decision. It could mark the point where tradition collided with modern reality and something had to give. Archie's story isn't isolated. It reflects a deeper tension within the monarchy itself, one that raises a powerful, unsettling question. Can an institution built on history survive the demands of the present? Because what unfolded around one child was never simply about titles or protocol. It was about the fault lines running beneath a centuries-old crown. Archie's journey has become symbolic of a larger institutional reckoning. His altered status, the careful wording of statements, the distance that grew without open confrontation, all of it mirrors the monarchy's struggle to define itself in an era that demands clarity. For generations, mystique protected the palace. Silence was strength, but today, silence breeds suspicion. Audiences no longer accept tradition without explanation. They question it, they dissect it. They expect transparency from institutions that once operated beyond scrutiny. And in that shift, the monarchy finds itself navigating terrain it was never designed to cross. At the heart of this reckoning lies a fundamental tension: modernization versus preservation. To modernize is to evolve, to loosen rigid hierarchies, to embrace new narratives. To preserve is to protect the very framework that gives the monarchy meaning. Archie's situation sits precisely at that intersection. His life outside traditional royal systems suggests adaptation, yet the institutional response to his family's departure signals an equally fierce desire to safeguard structure. It is a balancing act performed under global observation, where every decision risks alienating one side or the other, and balance, once disturbed, is not easily restored. Public perception has shifted in ways that cannot be reversed. Loyalty to the crown is now accompanied by scrutiny. admiration coexists with skepticism. The idea of unquestioned authority has given way to conversations about accountability and relevance. Archie's story, unfolding so publicly yet shaped by private negotiations, has intensified those conversations. People are not merely watching for ceremony. They are watching for integrity. They are asking whether heritage alone is enough to justify power in a rapidly changing world. For the monarchy, the challenge is profound. How does an institution rooted in symbolism adapt without dissolving the very symbolism that sustains it? How does it honor tradition while acknowledging that younger generations demand flexibility? Archie represents both continuity and disruption. His existence bridges past and future, yet his path diverges from expectation. In that divergence lies the possibility of transformation or fracture. If the monarchy can reinterpret legacy through compassion and evolution, it may emerge strengthened. If it clings too tightly to rigidity, it risks appearing detached from the society it seeks to serve. And still, beneath the philosophical debate, there remains the human thread, a child growing up amid history's weight, a family navigating loyalty and love under relentless scrutiny, an institution confronting its own reflection in a changing world. The grandeur of crowns and ceremonies may dominate headlines, but the true resonance lies in something quieter: identity, belonging, and the courage to redefine both. Archie's story does not offer easy conclusions. It offers questions. It invites reflection on power, responsibility, and the cost of tradition in an age of reinvention. And as each year unfolds, the consequences of this moment will continue to ripple outward, shaping not only one family's future, but the narrative of monarchy itself. And as the world enters to watch, one truth remains: this story isn't over. It's only just begun. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.